The airplane cabin was buzzing with chatter and the usual travel chaos, but no one paid much attention to the man in the corner. His clothes were worn, his hair messy, and his face carried the tired lines of someone who had been through more than most could imagine. Passengers glanced at him briefly, some sneering, some looking away, assuming he was just another struggling traveler. They didn't know his story or the incredible courage that was about to unfold. This man was a single dad, juggling life's struggles while carrying the weight of responsibility for his young daughter. He had flown countless times, but today's flight was unlike any other. As the engines hummed and the plane climbed into the clouds, an unexpected crisis began to unfold, one that would test every ounce of his strength, quick thinking, and courage. Passengers around him continued to ignore him, convinced he was just another stranger, until the situation took a shocking turn. Something happened midair, something that would push him into the center of a life-or-death moment, revealing bravery no one expected from a man in tattered clothes. What would he do when the plane's safety hung by a thread? Could a single dad, overlooked and underestimated, really save hundreds of lives before it was too late? The answers were about to unfold in ways no one could anticipate, and the eyes of the entire cabin were about to see him in a completely new light. The man gripped the armrest, his mind racing. He wasn't just a passenger today, he was someone who had faced impossible challenges before. Life hadn't been kind. Raising his daughter alone meant long nights, skipped meals, and endless struggles just to keep them afloat. People had judged him for his worn clothes, for his tired eyes, never realizing the quiet strength that ran beneath the surface as the plane cruised higher. A subtle shift in the hum of the engines caught his attention. Something was off. He glanced around, noticing passengers fidgeting, some whispering nervously, but no one seemed to grasp the danger approaching. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, maintaining calm smiles, yet even they carried a tension in their steps. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach, the kind of instinct a parent develops when their child's safety is at stake. Memories of past hardships flickered in his mind. There had been moments when he had been underestimated, dismissed, even ignored, but somehow, he always found a way through. Today was no different. Today, all of that experience, all of that grit, would be needed in ways no one on the plane could imagine. From the corner of his eye, he noticed a faint, unusual movement near the cockpit door. His pulse quickened. Something was about to happen, something that would change everything in mere minutes. Passengers continued to whisper and glance nervously at the ceiling, unaware that the man they had overlooked could hold the key to survival. And in that moment, the line between ordinary and extraordinary was about to blur forever. He stood slowly, trying not to draw attention, though every instinct told him he couldn't wait any longer. Across the aisle, a mother clutched her terrified child, whispering reassurances that sounded hollow even to her own ears. A businessman muttered into his phone, oblivious to the subtle alarms unfolding around him. No one realized just how close they were to disaster, and that made it even more terrifying. The single dad's eyes flicked back to the cockpit door. The subtle movement he had noticed before now seemed urgent. Something was wrong. A bead of sweat traced down his temple, not just from fear, but from the sudden weight of responsibility. This wasn't about his struggles on the ground anymore. This was about hundreds of lives, all depending on someone willing to act while others hesitated. He could feel the tension building in the cabin. Some passengers had begun to notice small signs of flicker of panic in the flight attendant's eyes. A low warning chime from the cockpit. Whispers turned to questions, questions to murmurs of fear. Yet no one turned to him. They still saw only the man in dirty clothes. The single dad who seemed out of place, underestimated, invisible. He thought of his daughter, of the life waiting for him on the ground, and something shifted inside. Years of being ignored, of fighting just to be seen, now became a quiet fire of determination. He started moving toward the cockpit, scanning the cabin, calculating every step at the same time. A group of passengers tried to interpret the warning signs in their own ways, some panicking, some frozen in disbelief. The plane seemed to hum with anticipation, each second stretching longer than the last. Every eye in the cabin was unknowingly on the edge of a moment that could change everything. He reached the front of the cabin, every step heavy with urgency. The hum of the engines seemed louder now, almost a warning, and the subtle vibrations of the plane under his feet made his heart pound faster. Flight attendants were moving with force. But he could see the fear behind their smiles. Passengers were gripping their armrests, some whispering prayers, others staring blankly, unsure what was coming. The cockpit door rattled slightly, and the single dad froze, his instincts screaming that something critical had gone wrong. He could hear a muffled conversation, rapid, intense, and realized the pilots were struggling with something he couldn't yet see. The plane tilted slightly, a minor shift that would have gone unnoticed by most, but he felt it instantly. Around him, panic began to ripple through the cabin. A woman's scream pierced the low murmurs, and suddenly, the weight of the moment pressed down on him like never before. He thought of his daughter, of the life he had built from hardship, and of all the times people had ignored him. All of that experience, all of that resilience, surged to the forefront. He knew he had to act, but exactly how? He glanced at the passengers, some frozen in fear, some clutching loved ones, others arguing with themselves over what to do. Every second counted. The plane's subtle shudders were growing more pronounced, and he realized there was no time to wait for help. This was a moment where one person could change the course of everything or fail spectacularly. The cockpit door opened slightly, and the voices inside grew more frantic. The single dad took a deep breath, his mind racing, knowing that the next move could determine the fate of everyone on board. Every eye in the cabin was unknowingly waiting, the tension building to a breaking point. Just as he steeled himself to move closer to the cockpit, a loud bang echoed through the cabin, making passengers jump and shriek. The plane lurched violently, sending cups tumbling and overhead bins rattling. A new wave of panic rippled through the crowd, and for a moment, chaos threatened to take over completely. The single dad grabbed a nearby seat for balance, heart hammering, realizing this was far worse than he had imagined. Through the shaking, he caught sight of something even more alarming. A small fire had sparked near one of the rear engines. The flight attendants shouted instructions, but the smoke was beginning to spread, curling ominously toward the cabin. The passengers' fear intensified. Some were crying, some were frozen, and a few tried to reach the exits. Though the plane was far too high for any emergency landing, he felt a surge of determination. This was bigger than any obstacle he had faced before. Not only was the plane in danger, but now every second counted for hundreds of lives. And yet, there was something else. In the corner of his vision, he noticed a man acting strangely near the cockpit, glancing repeatedly at the pilots, hands twitching nervously. Was it just fear, or was there something more sinister happening? The cabin seemed to shrink around him, the hum of engines now a low roar in his ears. He knew he couldn't rely on anyone else. Everyone was too distracted, too panicked, to notice what really mattered. His mind raced, calculating what he could do to prevent disaster. While the clock ticked mercilessly toward the moment of truth, every instinct screamed that the situation was about to spiral even further out of control. And the single dad realized this wasn't just a fight against chance, it was a fight against time, fear, and something far more unexpected than anyone on board could imagine. The single dad didn't hesitate. Ignoring the stares of panicked passengers, he lunged toward the cockpit, the plane rocking violently beneath him. The man near the cockpit flinched at his approach, revealing a small device clutched in his hand, something that didn't belong. Realization hit him in an instant. This wasn't just a mechanical failure. Someone had tried to sabotage the plane. The pilots' faces were pale, their hands gripping the controls with white-knuckled intensity. Smoke curled along the edges of the cabin, passengers screaming, but he forced himself to focus. He reached the man, wrestled the device away, and in a blur of adrenaline and instinct, disabled it just as the plane lurched again. The sudden quiet after the device clicked harmlessly into place was almost surreal, but the danger wasn't over. The engine fire had grown, and the pilots were struggling to stabilize the plane. With no time to wait for the crew, he coordinated with a flight attendant, guiding passengers away from the smoke, while helping the pilots follow emergency protocols he had learned long ago during a safety course he'd taken for his daughter's sake. Every second felt like an eternity, but slowly, the plane began to level out, the fire suppressing as emergency systems kicked in. Finally, the shaking subsided, and the cabin erupted into nervous applause and relieved tears. The single dad sank into a seat, exhausted, covered in soot and sweat. Passengers who had ignored him moments before now looked at him with awe, finally seeing the courage they had overlooked. The plane touched down safely, tires screeching against the runway, and passengers erupted into cheers and applause. Relief washed over the cabin, but the single dad remained quiet for a moment, catching his breath, letting the adrenaline drain from his body. Around him, people were hugging, crying, and thanking the crew. But when their eyes finally fell on him, the admiration was unmistakable. The man they had ignored, judged by his worn clothes and tired face, had saved them all.